Friday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to have you guys here for the final show of the week. Good one coming up. Phil Miller from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes to talk Twins offseason, to talk start of spring training. Yes, my goodness, it's only a little more than 2 weeks away that pitchers and catchers will report to Florida. And so figured I'd engage Phil on some talk on not just, the roster building that's happening so far, but what to watch once we get down to spring training. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more in future episodes of Daily Delivery as well. Got an interesting Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers connection that I want to share at the end of the show. We'll get to a little bit of a wild update at the end of the show as well. First, though, what did I miss? Interesting story this week that a lot of you have asked me about because I am one of the de facto go-to sources for writing about TV sports in this market, and I've been following closely along with the Bally Sports, owned by the Sinclair parent group. That whole saga over the last few years, where that parent company has been having a hard time getting rights fees negotiated, and now, not a surprise, but a report this week that Sinclair that they are going to be declaring bankruptcy. That Diamond Sports is going to. This is from a Bloomberg report on Wednesday, that they're going to skip a debt payment in mid-February as part of a preparation for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy restructuring. NextTV.com had a good kind of summary of all of this, basically saying, basically saying that there's kind of a couple different options on the table. Nothing has happened yet, so that's a good thing to know as you think about this. But that the bankruptcy seems to be the most likely option, and that's the sense I got from just kind of poking around this story the last couple days as well, with some people who know who are in the know. Let me just say, and so thinking about that, got to think about what does this mean if Diamond Sports, Sinclair parent company Diamond Sports, if they declare bankruptcy, what does that mean for the future of how sports are put on TV, things like that, how local teams are impacted, because like we've talked about plenty, the Twins, the Timberwolves, the Wild, other teams, the Lynx have quite a few games on that channel. A lot of teams are on that channel that you watch locally. What would happen if that channel, faced a serious problem of a serious financial, essentially, liquidation? And the financials are not good, by the way. It looks like the loans are in really rough shape. Sinclair reported in late November that Diamond Sports has about $600 million in cash on hand, but has to pay its teams around $2 billion this year in rights fees. So that is cash on hand minus the amount they need to pay teams in these rights fees that they pay for the right to broadcast games, sell those then to the rights fees carriers and make money. That's a big gap. $585 million in cash, $2 billion in money that they owe in 2023. So that's a big question. What happens next? Now, it's pretty interesting. A lot of you guys had questions when I posed this on Twitter as to what happens next. So here's kind of my best, not even guess really. Here's kind of how it could play out. I think a lot of teams are preparing contingencies right now, and I think the Twins offer the most fascinating test case. I didn't go into any specifics with any one team when I was kind of poking around at this, but I do feel like the Twins are the most interesting, A, because their season is coming up in 2 months, B, because they have been, I think, the most outwardly frustrated with Sinclair, with Diamond Sports, with the inability to get their games on these streaming apps like Hulu TV, YouTube TV have all dropped Bally Sports North in recent years. And even though Bally launched this direct-to-consumer app a few months ago, Major League Baseball, by and large, still does not have widespread rights fees on that. And it is my understanding that the Twins are not yet on the Bally app. So if you've bought that Bally app and you're paying the month-to-month and you're paying the year, you don't yet have access to the Twins. That could change in the next couple months. But anyway, that's a different story. That's the app. It's obviously not making up enough of the difference in lost revenue from some of these other streams that they've lost. Some of this, basically they've been in trouble ever since they bought these RSNs in 2019. They bought them for way too much, like $10 billion. And ever since then, the industry has just been changing so much that it looked like a bad deal from the beginning, and now it's finally coming to a head. But a team like the Twins, let's say, let's just say where they're at right now, and I think they're probably in kind of a wait and see mode, just like all these other teams are, waiting to see what this potential bankruptcy. And it hasn't happened yet. Bankruptcy has not happened yet. The report on Bloomberg suggesting that is the most likely outcome, that it could happen by, say, mid-February. But let's say you're the Twins. You got to prepare for all scenarios, whatever comes out of bankruptcy. Now, one of the things that could come out is that it kind of gets strung along and things are kind of business as usual, at least for a while. And that would be pretty good for a team like the Twins. They get north of $40 million every year from their local, from these rights fees, from Bally Sports North, from letting Bally Sports North show their games. But this is the last year of a 12-year deal that they are on right now. And I don't think they've been shy about saying they would like to explore every option available to perhaps go a different route in 2024. Now, maybe this kind of talk right now might hasten some of their planning or thinking of how fast they need to be thinking about an alternative solution. But I would say that that the Twins are in a better position than a lot of other Major League Baseball teams, for instance, that might have longer contracts with Bally's, and say if those got severed right away, say bankruptcy forced the breaking of these contracts, and suddenly the teams are like, well, what's going to happen next? At least the Twins know that they're kind of been planning for something like this, or planning at least, I think, for a future maybe without Bally, since their contract is up after this season, and there has been that frustration. So, my sense is nothing is imminent. Nothing's going to change tonight or tomorrow, but that the hope, with all these teams, with the Timberwolves, the Twins, the Wild, any team that's been kind of mired in the muck with this whole situation over these last few years, that there's a better model that can emerge that allows teams to maintain revenue while improving access and service to fans. And what I can imagine, what I've kind of read about, is some sort of combination of direct distribution to these, anybody who currently carries these games, like DirecTV, Comcast. Essentially, Bally's is acting as essentially, Sinclair acts as a Diamond Sports, is like a middleman essentially between the Twins and all of these, Twins, Wild, Timberwolves. They act as a middleman essentially between those teams and the people who are putting the games on, the carriers, actually, the streaming carriers, the cable providers, things like that. What if there wasn't that middleman, and you could, these days, you don't necessarily need that middleman. Probably back in the day before there was all these streaming options, maybe you did, but right now with everything so digital, everything going that way, you probably don't need that. You could sell directly to all of these distributors and have a direct-to-consumer app option as well. So that is probably the future I can imagine for, it might look different in various leagues, but I kind of imagine that this is maybe the first sign that this is not going to be the long-term model, and that this is going to be, bankruptcy obviously is a big deal. It's a financial restructuring, but that this is kind of one step in the process of disentangling the way you get sports, and that if this ends up being a good thing in the long run, and you get a better option for how you watch all these teams, it's, the amount of money you're having to pay is reasonable. If the teams are still satisfied with how much money they're taking in, that it could be a good thing in the long run. In the short run, still a lot of questions, I think. People are still in the wait-and-see mode. But you got to remember, too, it's all part of the evolution, right? There's been a lot of different iterations of how you get sports on TV. This might just be the next one. And, what's really fueling it, like I said, is that Sinclair, this whole group that made this purchase 4 years ago, it was just not a good business idea then, and it looks like an even worse business idea right now.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
It is good to have Phil Miller back on Daily Delivery. Little Twins baseball talk. It's getting to, it doesn't seem like it should be that time of year necessarily, Phil, but here we are in late January. It's Twins Fest time. Pitchers and catchers only, a little over 2 weeks away from reporting. So camp around the corner. I want to get your thoughts on this offseason so far, which really seemed like it pivoted around, obviously, the Carlos Correa and the unexpected signing of Carlos Correa after that drama. Maybe get into a little Hall of Fame talk with you as well. But first off, Phil, how you doing? How's your offseason?
Very brief, it seems like. It is funny, I'll bet a lot of players are already in Fort Myers. They tend to start arriving at the end of January, start of February. So, yeah, it's. I always think of the Diamond Awards and Twins Fest as the official start of the Twin season. So, happy opening day.
Happy opening day to you as well. I mean, like you said, it's been quite an off season so far. I don't think I've talked to you for the show or otherwise since the Carlos Correa saga unfolded in the manner that it did. What do you make of all of that and where the Twins wound up with him? Getting him on that 6-year deal for $200 million that could become longer and even more pricey if he does hit some certain incentive thresholds.
I think it's crazy that twice in 10 months, Carlos Correa absolutely fell into their lap with very little to do with them either time. And I'm really interested in how that has changed maybe their goals for the year, maybe the path of the franchise. If they didn't have Carlos Correa, would they have made the Louis Arise trade? Would it makes it feel like they're going for it now. I mean, they've got a lot invested. They're not backing off. They're not rebuilding. They're going for it now, and I think it's an interesting path that they're suddenly on because until 3 weeks ago, I don't think they seriously thought it could happen. So I don't know, that signing may have been more historic for this franchise than we even realized at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I mean, we know it all by now. We've talked it through a bunch of times already on this show, and you've written about it so many times. But I mean, it just twice it seemed like it was big market teams, much larger contracts, and then ultimately the medical stuff scares both the Giants and Mets away enough. Twins feel at least comfortable enough, and I do. The more you think about it, the more you examine it. 6 years is certainly not 12 or 13, so it's a much smaller risk in terms of duration of time. That said, it still has to make you at least a little bit nervous if you're the Twins to be out there for that long with that much money. A market unlike especially the Mets that just can't really afford to have a deal like this go awry and have a guy, if hopefully he stays healthy, but if he doesn't, that could become something that it affects future years, obviously, to come for them as well.
Yeah, although I don't think it's as big a risk as people make out. I mean, 10 years, 12 years, that is a lot more, a lot bigger amount to cover. But I wrote about this last week. It's pretty clear that it's not. It didn't come as a complete surprise to Carlos Correa. He is very careful on the base paths, which is where the injury occurred, and it's striking when you know this and look at it. In the last 6 years, he has attempted 8 stolen bases in 6 years. He's not a slow guy. He's not a big base stealer anyway, but he doesn't try. And I asked him about it in April, and he said, it's because I don't want to get injured. It's because the risk of being injured on the bases is more than one base is worth. And I wrote that at the time, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. in a broad way, although that is very narrowly defining the circumstances where there are times where it might be helpful. But after the season, you come to realize it's more than just, I don't want to break a finger or something. It's, he has an ankle injury that could flare up. One thing I think we learned from the Mets and Giants is there's something there. It's not a zero risk, but it's clearly a risk that Carlos has been managing all these years. The other thing is he doesn't triple either. He's had 5 triples in the last 6 years. That's like 5th fewest among players that have played as much as he has. So he doesn't extend himself on the bases. He doesn't take unnecessary risk. He is aware of what could happen and tries to manage it on the field. And he is still one of the 20 best players in the league, probably the best or second best player on the Twins. So they have to have some confidence that he knows what he's doing. He's gotten this far with it, and after 6 years, then age starts to maybe come into the picture, and they're protected after that. Right. So I was really struck by the evidence that he knows it and knows how to manage it, and he's never had a repeat of that injury since he got to the big leagues.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, in someone who's as smart as he is and doesn't necessarily need to take those risks to be an effective player, you can definitely see how this will and can work out. You made an interesting point before we got too deep on Correa, in that, how much did his signing then influence the ability to trade Luis Arraez? I mean, Arraez is not a shortstop, obviously, but he can play second base, first base. They've had him over at third from time to time, although I don't think that's his most effective position. But you add someone for 6 years who's going to be an infielder and a mainstay in the lineup. Does that give you a little bit more license then to trade Luis Arraez for what you maybe identify as a bigger need of pitching? I mean, how much do you think those two things are correlated versus how much do you think they were looking to, knew they had a position of strength with, or dealing from a spot where Arraez's value was high and could use that to get something that they thought they needed, regardless of Correa?
Well, it's certainly true that it's hard to imagine Luis Arraez's value ever being greater than it is now. The fact that it gets you a middle to upper end of the rotation starter and a prospect is a good indication of just how expensive pitching is these days. Excuse me. But without Carlos Correa, they were going to go into the season with Kyle Farmer as the shortstop, with Jose Miranda as the third baseman. And I think it would have been more kind of a, let's see what the kids can do. Let's, hopefully Royce Lewis comes back at midseason. Maybe Brooks Lee fits in here by the end. And the pitching staff, it should be better, but is it good enough to win a division? A lot of that would ride on the young guys coming up, on Louis Varland and Simeon Woods Richardson and Bailey Ober, and instead I think it caused them to think, especially I'm sure Carlos leads this charge, is he's here. The lineup is going to be better. It's going to be arguably good enough to win the division. They led the division on September 4th last year, so there's history there. And let's do what we can to strengthen the pitching staff, which was devastated by the injuries that really devastated the whole team last year, and make sure we have more depth. I wonder if they would have made the trade without Carlos signing back. Maybe you ride with Luis Arraez and try to find him a position and let some of the younger pitchers get by. But as long as Carlos Correa is around, they're kind of committed to trying to win the division, trying to somehow, some way win a playoff game.
Somehow, some way win a playoff game. Well, that's well said and well documented. It's been 18 in a row that they have lost, going all the way back to 2004 in Yankee Stadium, I might add, since they won a playoff game. What about it did strike me, these moves that they've made, the Arise trade, the dealing for Michael A. Taylor, who's an excellent defensive outfielder, maybe a little Buxton insurance there, but even if Buxton is when Buxton is healthy and playing center field, gives you some pretty good options in the outfield. Joey Gallo is a good outfielder as well. He's been way up there in the defensive runs saved. You look at the infield with Correa and Polanco kind of anchoring up the middle. You signed Christian Vasquez. You've made a lot of investments in pitching, which you wrote about. A lot of the trades lately have been for starting pitching. This is a team that really does seem to be, kind of modeling itself around a strength of, I suppose they feel good about their lineup, but the moves they've made have been largely to solidify pitching and defense. That seems like the identity if they're going to be good this year.
Yeah, I as kind of an aside to this, I wonder how frustrating it is to be a front office, to be an executive in a baseball front office and not know year to year what kind of baseballs you're going to use, because the ones that they used 4 years ago now in 2018, it completely changed the way teams played. The Twins were hitting 2 homers a game minimum, and the way you won was by bashing your opponents and hitting more home runs. The way that the game is played now has changed in just 3 years, and home runs are harder to come by. A lot of balls fly. A lot of balls that would have been home runs seem to be dying on the track. It's a factor that baseball only kind of sort of acknowledges is happening, but it's pretty obvious that it's happening on the field. And so the Twins have pivoted. Probably pitching and defense probably is a good starting point, good fundamental way to start to build a team. But if they're using the Bash Brothers baseball again this year, the Twins might have a little more trouble competing. Although they do have some home run hitters in that lineup, and it would have made that's one thing. The way the game is played now, Louis Arise might have had a little more value, and I'm sure that factored into consideration. They are going with their outfield defense should be either best in the league or close to it. That is, unless they decide that they need to beef up some of the hitting. We don't know how much Michael Taylor will play, although, fun fact, what outfielder played the most games in center field for the Twins last year? It was, I think, in any position in the outfield, it was Gilberto Celestino. So Michael Taylor is an upgrade on that, while Celestino gets a little more seasoning. The depth is a necessary part of this. The infield defense could be very good. We'll see how Jose Miranda does as an everyday second baseman, but they feel good up the middle with Polanco and Correa. So it's a new model, and it is amazing how much. To me, it's amazing how much they've changed in just 3 years. They've completely changed the starting rotation, and they have gone from a home run hitting lineup to a let's score what we need to and emphasize preventing runs more.
Couple more things for you, Phil, before I get to a Joe Mauer question for you. I want to, like I said, camp is only a couple of weeks away. It feels impossible with how cold it is right now, but it is warm in other parts of the country. They will travel there to Florida and begin preparation for this season very soon. Still possible moves to be made before then, but kind of with what we know about the roster right now, with what we know about the philosophy right now, what are maybe 2 or 3 things that you're looking for when you get down there in terms of things that still need to be sorted out, whether it's an overall pitching situation, whether it's a positional battle, or whatever it is that you are curious to see once once they get on the field in Florida.
Health, 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 health. I mean, this is a team that was
Yeah.
absolutely wrecked by the worst rash of injuries I've seen in my 15 years around them. How are the guys that missed so much time last year? They got 3 or 4 that had surgery. Kenta Maeda was an important part of the rotation. How is he? He's 35 now. Uh, you know, um, Kirilov is Alex Kirilov is a really big question because they had him projected as a number 3 hitter when all the wrist injuries started a couple of years ago. Um, he's also an important part about the lineup. Is he going to be an outfielder? Is he going to play first base? Is he able to hit? That's the reports have been encouraging, but they were encouraging last year too, and the injury came back and bothered him again. Um, that's the big thing. I think they've got a new head trainer, a couple of new assistants, and mostly just see how is Byron Buxton, how is Max Kepler, how is Jorge Polanco. Arrives was going to be on that list too, but they don't have to worry about that. But there's at least 10 or more players that you want to see. Are they going to be healthy, and how confident are they that they can stay healthy this year?
Maybe that's a good segue into the Joe Mauer discussion, because health was such a big factor in the back half of his career, forcing a position change, limiting his effectiveness in the final, 5 or so years of his career. He will be eligible for the Hall of Fame on the next go around. We just learned that Scott Rowland has made it in, newly eligible next year. The likes of Adrian Beltre and Joe Mauer, among others. Hall of Fame question for you: Is Joe Mauer a Hall of Famer? And if so, how long to you does it take him? Because I'm still not sure he is. Even though I know the credentials and the 7-year run of excellence that they always point to would suggest he is. I'm still not 100% sold, just because of it came up a couple years short maybe of how long you'd like to see it go, and he didn't really have any postseason success. But I want to know what you think in terms of his credentials.
Well, I understand those ideas, but I think on the list of all-time great offensive catchers who combined offense and defense, Joe is going to rank pretty high. I do think it eventually gets him in. Probably not first ballot, but the way guys get in anymore, it's get a third of the votes the first year, and then start climbing. That's It's an unusual circumstance of how Hall of Fame votes seem to go. And I don't know. You look at Joe's stat page, and it's just amazing how great he was in the first decade. He was a no doubter until he got hurt, and the concussions took their toll. Um, it's one of those questions where Albert Pujols faced some of this too. Is it better to retire and not have the glide path to the end of your career? Is it better not to have seasons where you weren't as good and leave those memories in voters' minds? I don't know. The one thing I will say is I have been surprised and somewhat disappointed by how Twins have done in the Hall of Fame voting. Not to say that Johan Santana and Joe Nathan and Torrey Hunter should all go to the Hall of Fame, but Santana and Nathan got 1 year and fell off the ballot, and I was a little surprised at that, because I thought they deserved more of a hearing. And so I'll be interested to see. I think Joe will fare a lot better, and I'll bet he gets more than a third of the votes next year. I actually changed. I have a vote, and I changed my strategy of voting. I've never been a strategic voter before, but I voted for some guys, Tory among them, just because I wanted them to stay on the ballot. And it feels like it is getting almost too hard for players to make the Hall of Fame. 75% is a high standard, and I know that that's intentional. But I voted for a few more guys than I normally would, just to help them stay on the ballot and move up and give them a little more of a hearing. It's strange. It seemed like such a binary choice. Is this guy a Hall of Famer or not? But it doesn't seem to work that way for
Right.
a lot of voters. So I would say it should be pretty exciting now that Joe's going to be on the ballot, and I'd say about 3 years from now, we might have to go to Cooperstown.
That'd be fun. I think maybe we're thinking along the same lines, but you're expecting a more robust ascent for him. I can still see it happening. It's hard for me to know exactly how everybody outside the Twin Cities feels about him, because inside there's still some division. But I would say his run of excellence was undisputed. Just don't know if that'll be long enough, if people's memories can go back that far and not focus too much on the 4 or 5 years that he had to have to finish his career because of those injuries. But we'll see. Conversation to be continued for another day. Exciting time for the Twins, getting ready to get onto the field here in a couple weeks. Phil Miller and Megan Ryan will be covering that extensively, as were a lot of our columnists, I'm sure. Phil, enjoyed catching up with you as always, and enjoy the rest of this increasingly shrinking off season.
Thanks, Mike. It's opening day. The off season's over.
Always good to catch up with Phil. This Joe Mauer question will be fascinating as next year approaches. I'll be really curious to see what kind of first year voting totals he puts up, and a lot of times that is a predictor as to whether someone will eventually get in. I think Phil's a lot more bullish on Joe's chances than I am, but you know what? Maybe I'm underrating just how great he was. Recency bias creeping in for me. So I guess the long story short there is let's wait and see for a year and see where Joe falls on that spectrum. Let's finish with the cooler. A couple quick things. One, the Wild 3-2 win over Philadelphia. A lot of fights in that game last night, and that beautiful Mats Zuccarello goal in overtime. Beat a defender, chip the puck right over the goalie on kind of a partial breakaway. Beautiful, beautiful play. Wild needed that one after 3 losses in a row. They get back on the right side of the winning streak and get themselves a little bit of momentum going into pretty soon coming into a break here. And conspiracy theorists unite. The Jets are hiring Nathaniel Hackett as their offensive coordinator. Nathaniel Hackett, you might remember, was the failed Broncos head coach from this past year. Did not even make it a year with Denver. However, Nathaniel Hackett also was Aaron Rodgers' offensive coordinator in Green Bay when Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVP awards in 2020 and 2021. Could Nathaniel Hackett's hiring in New York be a signal that Aaron Rodgers could be headed to the Jets? Who knows? Who knows? It's fun to speculate on stuff like that. I have no idea if there's any connection or if they just thought he was the best person for the job. But it is fun to speculate, and it is fun to think about, wow, the parallels between Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Now, you might recall that when Brett Favre finally got tired of Green Bay and Green Bay got tired of Brett Favre, the place they shipped him to was the Jets. You might also remember that was only for 1 year, and that after that 1 year, Brett Favre wound up with the Vikings. Is that Aaron Rodgers' path? Oh, man, it's fun to think about. I don't know about that. I don't know what will ultimately be the ultimately wind up happening here. Maybe Rodgers stays with Green Bay, and this is all just fun speculation. But it is fun speculation nonetheless. And we will see what if anything the Nathaniel Hackett hiring means to Aaron Rodgers. And that will do it for me this week. Thanks for listening along all week long. I'm Michael Rand, back at it again Monday with Royce on Daily Delivery.